The morning sunlight spilled across my kitchen counter, catching the soft shimmer of the silk blouse I'd worn for my meeting. I was sipping coffee, fingers tracing the chipped rim of my favorite mug, when my phone buzzed insistently. I didn't need to see the name. Its message alone tightened my chest. "Your kids will never be as successful as your brothers." The words read, blunt, cruel, delivered with the smug confidence of someone convinced they knew my life better than I did. I set the mug down, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, as my mind whirled. That laugh, his chuckle, lingered in my memory like a shadow. The man I had trusted, my husband, thought he could measure the worth of my children against the achievements of my brother. I straightened my spine, feeling the smooth fabric of my blouse slide over my shoulders, and a strange calm settled over me. Hurt, yes, but beneath it, a stubborn pride, a quiet, simmering fire that refused to be ignored. I glanced at the view from the window. The city stretched below, sunlight glinting off the towers, a world full of possibilities I had fought to claim. And in that moment, I made a choice. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would simply show. I remember the day it all began to feel impossible. I was 24, fresh out of graduate school, clutching my first paycheck with trembling hands, standing in the cramped living room of my parents' house. My brother, Ryan, was sprawled on the couch, a smug grin lighting up his face as he talked about his latest promotion. "Why don't you just stick to something simple, Liv?" my father said, shaking his head. "Ryan's making real moves. You're trying." The words hit harder than I expected. My stomach tightened, my hands cold and clammy, my chest constricting with the weight of their doubt. I opened my mouth, ready to defend myself, but the lump in my throat swallowed any argument. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was capable, that I had ideas, plans, dreams they couldn't see, but I couldn't. My grandmother had been sitting quietly in the corner, knitting something that smelled faintly of lavender. She looked up at me, her eyes warm but piercing. "Olivia," she said softly, "never let anyone else's measure define your worth. You have a fire inside you. Nurture it. Protect it. One day, you'll see, they'll have to notice it." Her words wrapped around me like a cloak, a secret talisman of hope I could cling to. That night, I went back to my tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes and half-read books, and made a vow. I would not stay in the shadow of anyone's judgment. I would work in silence, learn every skill, chase every opportunity, and I would do it alone if I had to. The sting of rejection, the taste of being dismissed, it became fuel. Every "you can't," whispered by my family, every condescending glance from my brother, every sigh from my parents, each one pressed me harder against the edge of my ambition. And so I started. Not with fanfare, not with announcements. Just with determination, a worn leather notebook, and the quiet, stubborn belief that someday, the world would see what I could do. I poured myself another cup of coffee, the steam curling in front of my face like a fragile curtain between who I was and who I was becoming. Those early nights were brutal. My tiny apartment smelled of old books, printer ink, and determination. I worked until my fingers ached, teaching myself skills I had been told I'd never master: coding, financial planning, negotiation. Every small victory felt monumental: landing my first freelance client, receiving praise for a presentation I'd nearly canceled out of fear, seeing a profit for the first time in my fledgling business. It wasn't easy. There were nights I sat on the floor in the dark, staring at my reflection in the window, asking myself if I was foolish. The shadows whispered that I wasn't enough, that I would fail, that Ryan would be right all along. But my grandmother's words were a steady pulse at the back of my mind. Never let anyone else's measure define your worth. I met Claire Donovan at a local business networking event, a seasoned entrepreneur with a reputation for spotting raw talent. She saw me fumbling through my pitch and smiled, not condescendingly, but with genuine curiosity. "You have potential," she said. "Let me show you how to grow it." Claire became my mentor, my confidant, the rare voice that pushed me without judgment. She taught me how to negotiate, how to invest, how to turn small opportunities into milestones. And slowly, the world began to shift. My first major client came through, a boutique firm willing to trust a young woman who had no pedigree, only vision. I celebrated quietly, sending a text to Claire instead of posting anything on social media. Every success was my secret rebellion against the people who had doubted me. I upgraded my skills, then my projects, then my lifestyle. I moved into a loft that overlooked the city skyline, its walls adorned with art that inspired me rather than comforted my family's approval. I hired my first employee, then a small team. Each step was deliberate, careful. I didn't want anyone to know just yet, not my parents, not Ryan, certainly not my husband. By the time I hit my first major milestone, earning what my family had always considered impossible for someone like me, I had learned the art of discretion. My Instagram posts were modest. I posted photos of coffee cups and city walks, never my office, my team, or my earnings. It felt deliciously quiet, a private victory that only I fully understood. I had built a life of accomplishment in the shadows, silently gathering power, knowledge, and self-respect. And all the while, my husband's words and my family's doubts fueled me like dry wood to a growing fire. They thought I was fragile. I knew I was unstoppable. The knock on my office door was polite but insistent, like a whisper that demanded attention. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. My parents and Ryan had arrived, expecting to see the same young woman they had always dismissed, timid, struggling, unsure. I took a slow, deliberate breath and set aside the documents I had been reviewing. The office, my sanctuary, reflected every step of my journey. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off a carefully curated collection of modern art. My desk, a sleek slab of walnut, bore only a few personal touches: a small lavender-scented candle, my grandmother's leather-bound notebook, and a crystal paperweight that had been a gift from Claire. The room exuded confidence and calm, and I allowed them a moment to take it in. Ryan's eyes darted around, widening as he noticed the gallery-worthy painting above my desk. "Is this your place?" he asked, voice wavering. I smiled faintly. "Yes." "Mine." My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Olivia, we didn't realize." "Please," I interrupted gently but firmly, "let me finish." I rose from my chair, feeling the soft leather of the seat beneath my fingertips. "You've spent years measuring my worth against Ryan's accomplishments, against expectations you thought were universal. You assumed my children and I would be defined by comparison, by limitations you imposed." I walked slowly around my office, letting the space speak for itself. The diplomas framed on the wall, the awards subtly displayed, the sleek laptop open to a thriving business platform. I let them see my team through the window, talented people working efficiently, passionately, under my guidance. "I didn't fail," I continued, voice steady, "because I refused to let your doubts dictate my path. I built a life, a business, a future, quietly, deliberately, and successfully. My net worth surpasses what you imagined possible, and I am the sole owner of everything in this office." Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. My mother's hand trembled against her chest. My father's face turned pale, a flash of shame passing through his eyes. None of them had expected this. None of them had anticipated the fire I had nurtured in secret, the resilience they thought they had broken. I took a final step toward the center of the room, feeling the weight of years of dismissal lift off my shoulders. "I am not the girl you thought I was," I said softly, "and my children, my family, will never be measured by someone else's standards. Only by our own." Silence settled over them, thick and suffocating, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, just as the shock began to sink in, I noticed my grandmother's notebook on my desk. I lifted it gently, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. Her words carried me here, I thought. "Never let anyone else's measure define your worth." For the first time in years, I felt completely seen, not by them, but by myself. I watched them fidget under the weight of their own expectations and my revelations. There was a pause, almost tangible, before I spoke again, this time with purpose. I built this life, I said, but I didn't do it alone. And I've learned that success isn't just about numbers. It's about growth, integrity, and leaving behind what holds you back. If any of you want to be part of my world, it will be on different terms. My father swallowed, his eyes darting to Ryan. Terms, he asked cautiously. Yes, I said. Each of you has a choice. You can continue living in doubt and comparison, or you can step forward and do the work to become better versions of yourselves. I turned to Ryan first. You need to stop defining your life by how you overshadow others. Learn humility, embrace real effort, and stop thinking the world owes you recognition. His jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Then my mother. You've spent years worrying about appearances, about family reputation. You need to let go of the control and support growth, your children, your own goals, without judgment. I took a breath, letting the words settle. And, my father, you need to stop measuring your pride against someone else's achievements. Mentor, guide, but don't dictate. Learn to respect others' paths, even if they differ from your own expectations. I could see the shame and hesitation, but I also saw a glimmer of hope. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with acknowledgement. I paused and let my eyes sweep across the room, taking in their silent, attentive faces. I will help, but only as a guide, not a savior. I will provide resources, mentorship, support, but it will be earned, not demanded. You will prove your commitment through action, through growth, not through excuses or comparisons. The room was quiet again, but this time it was different. There was weight, yes, but also possibility. I felt the energy shift, the balance tilt in my favor, not through spite or anger, but through strength, clarity, and the quiet authority of someone who had endured and triumphed. Finally, I returned to my desk and picked up my grandmother's leather notebook. The smell of lavender filled the room faintly as I opened it, recalling her words that had carried me here. I placed it in front of them. This is your reminder, I said softly, that change begins when you measure yourselves by your own standards, not someone else's. For the first time, they looked at me not as the young woman they had underestimated, but as someone who had redefined success entirely on her own terms. And in that shift, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not revenge, not triumph over them, but the calm of knowing I had set the stage for real growth, for real respect, for real family transformation. Weeks passed, and the change, though gradual, began to take root. Ryan enrolled in courses to sharpen his skills, learning the humility he had long resisted. My parents started letting go of their comparisons, offering support without judgment, and even my husband, awkwardly at first, began to notice the quiet strength of our children and the life I had built. I watched from my loft office one evening, the city skyline glowing as the sun dipped behind the towers. My children laughed in the next room, their energy light and unburdened, free from the weight of anyone else's expectations. A sense of calm settled over me, one that was earned, not given. I poured myself a cup of tea, inhaling the faint scent of lavender that always reminded me of my grandmother, of her belief in me when no one else did. I opened her leather-bound notebook, fingers tracing the worn edges, and smiled. Her words echoed through my mind as vividly as they had years ago. Never let anyone else's measure define your worth. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every whispered doubt from my family had led me to this quiet triumph, a life built on resilience, skill, and self-respect. And in that reflection, I understood something profound. True power is not in proving others wrong. It is in holding your own life with dignity, in creating growth, in allowing others to rise while refusing to bend to old patterns. I had become that person, the one who could guide without controlling, love without compromising, and succeed without apology. I glanced at my children again, imagining the lives they would build, untethered by doubt, fueled by curiosity and confidence. I thought of my grandmother, of Claire, of every mentor and quiet supporter along the way. They had seen the fire in me, and I had nurtured it into a force that no one could diminish. Finally, I set the notebook down, looking out at the skyline one last time before speaking softly, more to myself than anyone else. I am enough. I always was. And we, my family, my children, and I will measure our lives by the standards we set, not the ones anyone else imposes. In that moment, the weight of the past lifted entirely. I was free. And for the first time, fully, beautifully, I felt the joy of owning not just my success, but my story, completely, unapologetically, and with grace.